What's up, YouTube? It is your girl Carla. Welcome to my spot on the internet. This is Worth Beyond Circumstance, and today we just gonna have a little chit chat. Okay, so how you doing, sis? Okay, I hope you guys are doing good today, this evening. All right. Today's topic is who is self, and I talk about a lot about the self and what does self want? What does self need? How is self perceiving things? Where is self in our learning experience, in this life experience? Okay. When I say self, I am talking about three different parts of you, or four. I'll say four. I think four is fair. Your emotional self, your physical self, your mental self, and your intuitive self. All parts of these um, dimensions of you create the whole you. And just like a relationship that you're starting with somebody, or a friendship that you're starting with somebody, or a work to work situation that you're starting, it's important to understand who that person is. What is the foundation of them? What are the protocols if you're talking about, a work situation? What makes them tick? What are their challenges? What challenges are they experiencing or that they have issues with? Um, how do they love? What are their likes? What are their dislikes? What are their boundaries? How do they communicate? Like all of these things are very important. And we cannot effectively show up around other people when we don't know those dimensions of our own self. And so this is something that's really important to me because when we show up in spaces with other people, it's easy to lose ourselves because we don't understand ourselves. We don't know ourselves. And so I want to start off by understanding, um, I want to start off by talking about why it's important to understand these parts of yourself. Okay. So we have the emotional body. I have a list here. So if you guys wondering like what I'm looking at, that's what I'm looking at. So we'll start off with the emotional self. We all have emotions. It doesn't matter if somebody it seems to be detached from their emotions. It doesn't matter if somebody comes off as careless or seems that they don't have any emotions. They could be big, they can be small. We all have emotions. But understanding how your emotions work and how you internalize emotions is important. So that way, if you're interacting with somebody else, you can express to them and share with them how you emotionally feel about things. So we have a lot of, well, I'll say guys, because it's probably more common in guys where guys aren't necessarily in tune with their emotions. Society has taught them that understanding and intellectualizing their emotions make them weak, make them less than a man, you know. It makes them not respected. And that's not true. We all have emotions, but when we understand our emotions, um, and when you are able to effectively communicate your emotions to other people, it allows you to accept that person's emotions. Okay. So I don't necessarily view myself as being a overly emotional person. I intellectualize my emotions more than actually expressing them. But this is something that I've had to learn over the years and I still work on. But because I understand that I might not embody the emotions like a typical woman would be, assumed to, then I have to be intentional with showing those emotions a little bit more. And for me, it looks like, you know, my feelings are hurt because when you did yada da da blah blah blah. Okay. And it teaches us to communicate those needs. It allows us to understand our own emotional needs, you know. But if we don't understand that for ourselves, what we need emotionally, how we show up emotionally, how we project emotionally, it makes it really hard to understand other people and their emotions. And the same thing with the physical body, how you physically show up to spaces. You know, I am someone who has RBF. Girl, the resting bitch face is out of control, especially when I'm in my head, you know? And that could be intimidating for a lot of people. I'm not a small girl. I work out. I'm tall. You know, I'm very blunt and direct in my speaking, so I can come off as being what it sounds like. I get called aggressive all the time, but because I know how I am, how I show up, and what I look like to other people, it I'm aware of these things, so it allows me to be intentional when I show up to spaces to not be as intimidating. You know, um, I come off as more friendly. I have a tendency sometimes to kind of like be in my head because I think all the time. I'm constantly having conversations with myself. So I could be in one space doing one thing, but I have like 50, 11 different conversations going on in my head and I'm keying to myself. And to other people, that looks like me being detached from actually what's going on, me being careless, me not wanting to be around things. So I have to make sure when I show up to spaces that I'm present, mentally present, physically present. Um, and when how I communicate with people, I guess this goes into partially with the mental. Maybe not. It's probably more so just physically. But how I communicate with people, I have to be careful how I communicate with people and be intentional because I know that with being direct and having somewhat of a deeper voice for a female, it can come off as aggressive. And a lot of people get really intimidated and turned off by that. You know, I don't take it as an opportunity to change who I am, but it allows me to be able to come off differently so I can resonate with people more. And so that becomes really important, especially with dealing with our kids, you know. Um, it's not been the easiest for me to do that because I'm a very, fiery person. I'm a very energetic person. I'm communication is my thing. And if you know anything about astrology, my house of communication is ruled by Leo. So if you know any Leos, how they like to be the center of attention and they're very passionate about things, that's how I communicate. So for people who don't know me, it can be not so much of a good experience. And so being able to embody the positive attributes of that energy becomes really important. And even with the mental, if you don't know who you are mentally, bro, like you can just give it all up, because who you are mentally is literally the foundation of how everything else comes off, how you think. If you're a person who thinks negatively, then everything that you say and do, your vision of life is going to be negative. And being able to harness your thoughts and change your thinking is very, very important in this life, because our mind is like, oh my God, our mind is magical. It's like a garden. Um, I went to school for life coaching and hypnotherapy. And in both courses, they teach you how powerful the mind is, the subconscious is. They gave us this example of like a garden. Your mind is like a garden. Your mental state is like a garden. Whatever you feed it, whether it's poison or whether it's fruitful, it's gonna grow in abundance. So being able to understand your mental state is important because you have to be accountable for the things that you think. You have to be accountable for the things that you perceive. And when you know those parts, that part of yourself, your part, the mental part of yourself, it allows you to take accountability for one, but show up and be able to communicate based off of where you are at mentally. Okay. And the fourth one was intuition. How are you communicating with the intuitive self? You know, a lot of times, especially women, I'm gonna just say people just in general, not even women, but people in general are just so far out of touch with their intuition that they don't know what they feel. And as women, us being intuitive is like our birthright. I do believe everybody has intuition, but because women, we are connected with the physical and the spiritual, we receive those nudges a lot more than men do. And so, you know, being able to control the things that penetrate our auric field, whether it's the music that we listen to, whether it's the shows that we listen to, the people that we interact with, those things all can affect how we're feeding our soul. And if it blocks, if it, and the ability for it to block our intuition, you know. So when you take all four of those aspects, four of those perspectives into account, all four of those things that make up the self, there's four different parts of you that you have to really understand in order to really understand who you are as a whole. Okay. And when you're not in tune with all of those parts, when you are not intentionally growing all parts of those cells and getting to know all parts of self, it makes it really hard for you to show up in relationships because when you don't understand yourself, when you don't go through the trials and the ups and downs and the challenges of life with learning who you are, it makes it very hard to accept people. It makes it very hard, and as mothers, we have to become get more into practice of, taking time out for ourselves and understanding who we are, whether it's through journaling, whether it's through talking to people, whether it's you know, seeing a counselor or having friends that promote abundance and expansion and learning and not limit you. We have to become accountable for those things because we have to teach our children these things. That's, as mothers, that is our job to do that. And then, I get that it's hard. I'm a single mother of three kids. I work full time. I work in a different city. I still have life going on for myself and kids from 4 to 15. I get it. It's hard, but you make time for the things that you want. And this is what I believe is the missing element when it comes to relationships because it allows us not embodying our true and authentic selves hinders us from growing. Okay. Um, when you understand yourself, you become more confident because nobody can tell you who you are. Can't nobody tell you who you are. Can't nobody tell you you're not a hard worker. Can't nobody tell you that you lazy. I mean, they might, but you get what I'm saying. Can't nobody tell you that you have no emotions. Can't nobody tell you that you're crazy. Can't nobody tell you nothing because you've already accepted self for who self is. You know the good and the bad. We're not perfect, no. But when you accept who you are and you're able to embody that confidently, it makes you have more awareness of yourself. And when you have more awareness of yourself, and you've gone through the learning trials of accepting yourself and you've sat with the hard things with self, it allows you to love people for who they are and how they show up to these spaces. And this gives you an opportunity to grow. When one door opens, or when one door closes, another one opens. It allows you to grow your perspective and understand people not just in your local neighborhood, but people in other countries. You don't become so judgmental of the people that you see on TV. You understand that they're just at a space in their life that, that they have to grow through. And so these are the things that I believe will allow us to make to be better mothers. And it takes away a lot of the stress that we might face dealing with the collective as a single parent. They people girl people love to throw dirt on us. They love to say that we hoes. They love to say that we not worth nothing. They love to say all of the fucking things. They love to say those things, but in reality, they don't understand the struggle that we've had to go through. Since day one of becoming a mother, we've had to really level up in our thinking, and that means that we have to say no to certain people. But this is these are some of the things that we have to grow through in order to get to know ourselves, you know? So that is my video on understanding the self. So going forward, when I mention self, you understand that self are the four parts that make up to yourself. Your mental being, your physical being, your intellectual or mental being, and your intuitive being. So get to know self, girl. You're gonna really be surprised what you find. So I will catch you next time. Please remember that you are worthy and your worth is beyond your circumstances. Okay? I don't even know if that sounds right, but we gonna figure it out. Peace.